Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Danielle Edwards. Thank you so much for joining Jeff Foundation's community webinar series. We're going to just take a few moments and let some of the other attendees sign on. We've got a bunch of families registered today, so just want to make sure everyone gets the chance. We'll kick it off in about 2 minutes from now, but we've got a great group of panelists ready to go, and I'm looking forward to having this webinar with all of you. All right, everybody. I think we've got a bunch of people signed on now. We can kind of kick things off. Just again, everyone, my name is Danielle Edwards. I am Jeff Foundation's Community Engagement Manager. I have been a part of the foundation now for almost 5 years. I have a brother that is impacted by Duchenne, which has kind of got my involvement within Jeff Foundation. While you probably would have seen me at a workshop around the country hosting these, we're kind of excited to do these virtual. It's allowed us to really reach more families and get more education to families that really need it. This year, we're kind of focusing our virtual series on being better prepared as we have experienced COVID. No one could have expected that, and it's turned our world upside down. So we want to make sure we're doing our job as an advocacy organization to make families better prepared on some of the difficult journeys or transitions that they might experience when dealing with a neuromuscular disease. So today, again, I'm really excited to have 3 panelists joining us who all have children impacted by a neuromuscular disease that will be speaking on nonverbal communication and smart home devices that can better help you and your family take care of your child. So again, thank you all so much for joining us today. We're really looking forward to this. There is a chat section in the comments below. If you have any questions for the panelists, please feel free to drop those in the chat. We're happy to take questions at the end. We'll have our speakers speak first and then open up for Q&As. So with that being said, I'll kick it over to Susan first, but then we also have Steve and then Catherine joining us as well. So go ahead, Susan, who also has our special guest online, Stephen.
Hi, my name's Susan, and this is Stephen, otherwise known as Harry Potter Jr. He is 18 and a half years old. He said a few words in his early life, and by age 5, he had lost all ability to talk. And he learned some signs. He can read the signs still, but honestly, due to Duchenne's, he can no longer do the signs. So back in junior high school years, he did an after-school program where he met his now BFF. And his BFF used a communication board to type out his letters and actually shared it with Stephen. So the after school staff actually showed me that. They're like, well, Stephen knows how to read. He can type. I'm like, what? And over one day, and we worked on it some more, and we perfected it pretty much for us. All it is the equivalent of a QWERTY board printed out on cardstock, thick cardstock, and thick laminate. We have some on some thick foam stuff, but it's harder to laminate. And we have these all over the house. And so even on the back, we were trying to play bocce ball that had been modified, and he had to tell us, we couldn't move it for him. He had to tell us how to move the bocce ball ramp and that. So we had to come up with other things. So Stephen points to the letters and spells things out. And just like a typical teenager, he abbreviates. So it's TY for thank you, it's YW for you're welcome, Y for yes and for no, and that's how he communicates. I will tell you that if you don't believe in him that he can do it, he will prove you right. He will not type for you. But if in your heart, and he's got that sixth sense like all of our kiddos do, in your heart, if you know that he can do it and really believe that he can do it, he will type with you. So we had problems at the school level with the typing. And then on top of it, the school said, we don't approve that. Would you stop? We don't approve of that communication method because that meant that somebody was moving his hand. So yeah. So we ended up actually pulling him from the school district, and we now bring staff support in and do real curriculum, all with assisted. Somebody holds his hand, but actually, honestly, one of our supports has special needs of her own. She's dyslexic. She's got a couple other things in there too. And he's here typing all the answers out before she can even get the answer formed in her brain. And she's like, are you sure that's the right one? And he's like, yep. And sure enough, he's got it. But because she's got that belief system, it makes a whole lot of difference. And it goes back to where you assume competency in all of our kiddos. It's not the same competency that you and I might have for each other or ourselves, but we still assume competency, and he's doing it. I mean, he's passing grade level. We're at a junior right now because we failed a year and lost a lot of time due to being out sick. So we're doing grade level, age level, appropriate work, and passing it on the most part, high B's and A's, which is something he's never been given the chance to do. So yeah, we're pretty proud of that. So that is our story in a nutshell. It all started with a friend helping him out, and it's gone from there. Do you have something to say other than you're being funny? Sit up. I'm gonna have to cover Harry Potter if you don't stop. You're gonna be in your best if you don't stop. Do you have something to say? He goes, yes, I need support, but it is me answering the questions.
Yes, Stephen. Yep, no, go ahead. Anything else, Stephen, you want to add? You guys good?
I'm good for now. I'll take questions later.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you guys for sharing that. With that being said, I'll throw this over next to Steve.
Hey, our story is kind of similar, but has its differences. Our daughter Megan is 38 years old. She was born with a neuromuscular disorder called congenital fiber type disproportion. It fits within the general framework of muscular dystrophies, and but not well known. The one great advantage, if you will, is that it's non-progressive. So we're able to maintain Megan's level of functionality, if you will, physical functionality with a lot of support and therapy. We got into augmentative communication using a computer-like device back when she was still in grade school. And we started off with a device from Prinky Romick Company. And it had very little icons, and it was a very fixed scheme. So it was, if you think of it as a as most augmentative devices are, it is a picture will represent a word or a phrase. And so it's something that there's something obvious about the picture that connects it to a thought. It might be a green frog. holding an umbrella. I just made that up. So that could obviously represent the color green. It could represent a frog. It could represent water if there's water around it. It could represent the umbrella itself. It could represent a phrase that says, "Is it raining outside?" I mean, you kind of get the idea that the picture relates to a phrase or word that you might want to speak. So in essence, it's a little different from what Stephen uses there in terms of just spelling out what he wants to communicate. And Megan has some real difficulties with her visual acuity. She's got some nystagmus, so her eyes move kind of constantly, and that makes her visual acuity difficult. So when we started out, it was a real challenge for her to use the device with rather small pictures that she had to hit the right thing, and it can get very complex. So we weren't overly successful, but the company later introduced something which was more of a dynamic touch screen, more what you would kind of expect in the years coming up around 2000 or so, where it was actual touch screen interface, and you could touch one icon and that would actually bring up a whole new screen of icons. And it was a big change. It was almost like learning a new language for Megan, but she worked on that. Being in school was a challenge, though, because none of the teachers were trained on it. They had some support specialists, but they weren't able to do a lot except try to help the teachers. But we just found it to be a really frustrating experience for Megan. So school was not a really great experience for Megan. There was a lot of frustration. And once she aged out of the system, then it was a matter of, trying to support her ourselves and trying to find ways to help her. So we've recently changed devices, and I'll touch more on that later, but that kind of gives you a general background of our situation and our daughter.
Did you want me to go? Danielle?
Sorry. You think after doing so many of these, I would be a professional by now? I just couldn't find the mute button. Go ahead, Catherine. I'm sorry. Thanks, Steve, for sharing that.
Hi, everybody. My name is Catherine, and my son Julian is 9 years old. We had the luck to get connected with the Jet Foundation a couple of years ago when Julian went to sleepaway camp to Camp Promise for the first time 2 years ago, which is a huge step for him. He has Pompe disease, which is a muscular dystrophy that's fairly rare. I won't say too much about it except to say that there's a fairly intense treatment that he goes and gets infused with a treatment all day, every other week. And that does arrest the degeneration, the progressive nature of it somewhat. But because the treatment is fairly new, still just over a decade that it's been getting into kids, there's like lots that isn't known about what their abilities may be over time. And it's a small community, right? It's you're sort of trying to figure out from connecting with folks and trying different things out. And we were really lucky to be connected with a really strong Birth to 3 program after Julian was diagnosed at 6 months. And they moved him quickly into an inclusive program where they had experience with assistive communication. And they basically started with a binder that had picture grids for different areas, different types of activities. And Julian honestly never really strongly took to this. He, you know, but I think it was a really good thing to familiarize him with that capacity and to start to encourage him to think about how to use other forms of communication besides his voice. His voice, he loves speaking, he loves singing, and he has great vocal tone, but very little articulation. Pretty strong vowels, many indistinguishable consonants. So it's always been a challenge because, you know, over time, we as his parents and others caregivers folks who are close to him, begin to understand his voice. And that's much easier for him, right? To just speak to us and expect us to guess. So something we focused a lot on is understanding alternatives for people who don't know as well, and working on speech repair. Because there's oftentimes, I mean, you know, 9-year-olds, they can be a little random. And so he'll bring something up out of the blue or be singing some song that I haven't heard, and I'm expected to understand what he's saying. And so, you know, it's easy to get frustrated with that. And so, you know, what has now become his talking iPad has been a source, you know, a primary way that he can repair his speech, especially as he gets more frustrated, to be able to communicate that. So yeah, it was the binder with the different sort of pictures kind of got him used to it. And then pretty quickly, when he was 3 and going to enter the pre-K program through Seattle Public Schools, that's where we are, they gave him an iPad with touch chat, a touch chat program, which is sort of predictive. It's very similar in that there's pictures, buttons are labeled, but he very quickly started moving to the letters part, just spelling out things. And he'll sometimes navigate to different sort of words and concepts. There's, you know, a section on action, which is basically verbs, and describe words, which are adjectives and so on. But mostly he types in there now when he wants to. And he uses it. You can program the buttons, which has been sort of also a really useful thing that we've been able to do with him to kind of understand what it is that he wants to talk about, to program in phrases. We had hopes that that would allow him to kind of connect quickly, you know, get that wording out when he was talking to somebody new, like, wait a minute, give me a minute to form my answer, or simple things like, I need repositioning help. He's, you know, not able to stand or bear his own weights. But it's turned out that he doesn't really care for those too much, and he'll use, you know, his voice to kind of say those kinds of things, which is more or less effective. And then he wants to use the phrase programming to put in jokes. And honestly, I mean, I think that's wonderful, right? Because what is our communication as people? I mean, it's not just function, right? That's not the heart of how we communicate. It's about sharing humor and feeling and all of those things. And for a 9-year-old, the way to connect to peers is really very much through jokes, through putting their names into his iPad so he can approach them and, you know, say their name, and they get excited about the fact that they're on this device, right? I mean, I think that's such a key part of it, is making this not a requirement. You must do this, but this is an option for you to get your what you want to say across. And let's find ways to use it in ways that are meaningful to you, amplify your own desire to communicate. Because Jillian's great at connecting with adults, and it's been more of a struggle with peers. You know, kids don't always have the patience. But on the other hand, once they start to see, hey, this is a way, then they're much less sort of resistant to change or difference than many adults are. So that's a little bit about our journey. And yeah, I mean, I think one big change will be, I mean, the iPad, even though it's, you know, I mean, compared to what we might have had when we were kids, is really great and small and powerful. It's also bulky, right? How do you get that on a desk with schoolwork? you know, with a computer these days, you know, he's doing all remote school and then having the iPad on the side and sometimes doing that in his standard device that he uses a couple times a day. It's a lot. And then when we're out in the community, you know, with his wheelchair, to put that on as an arm makes it really difficult for him to then have control of the wheelchair and the power chair, and in the manual chair, which we rarely use, I mean, it's virtually impossible, right? So I think, you know, one thing going forward is to think about, okay, when will Julian get a phone? Because he can do texting on it, right? And we may or may not be able to find a device that then will say those words aloud, or say them audibly, right? But I mean, just to have that to be able to use as speech repair, I think could be really powerful. So that's all I'll say for now. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Catherine. I agree with all your points there. And just to kind of follow up, I'd love just kind of transitioning, and I think we can kind of take some questions from the community as well, but kind of just now kind of get into a conversation here, because I think some of you guys shared a lot of similarities. And I guess one of my questions is kind of, how have you handled remote learning now? And then also, how, you know, going back to the school points, like how do you have conversations with the administrative, the school, you know, those working within the schools, your teachers, and also the classmates? Like, how do you get inclusion within the classrooms? How do you get people to understand the technology that your children are using? Kind of things like that. If anyone wants to take a stab at that.
Catherine, you're probably the best. Okay. No, I'm sorry. You're probably the best one to answer because we're not done in a live classroom.
Yeah, I mean, it's a constantly moving target here, right? Here in Seattle, we have been out in entirely remote school since last March. They are now talking about sending back some teachers and students in the lower grades beginning in March of this year. For I guess a few months before the school year's done. We honestly don't expect to go back, and you know, as many of you may have concerns about exposing our son who has, you know, respiratory vulnerabilities to the classroom. It's hard to know when we'll go back, but at the same time, I mean, social development is a huge thing for Julian, and finding ways in which he can interact casually and build friendships is something that is a real struggle, right? He's not yet at a point where he sort of has any level of independence online. He'll look at Google Maps and he'll Google YouTube videos he wants to watch, but we're not talking about interactivity there. So school is really the main way that, and we have organized weekly play dates with a couple of friends, siblings of his that he met in music class many years ago, and who are sort of well bonded to him. And I think that's been helpful to sort of enhance this idea of remote, the social possibilities of being virtual. And his teacher has frankly been super great this year. Last year, as we were going into the end of the school year, remote learning for the first time, I mean, it was just, as you can imagine, I'm trying to think of a polite word for it. Maybe you know the one I'm thinking of. But it was a mess. And, you know, even now, I mean, there's lots of technical glitches, dropping calls all the time, but they spend, you know, several sessions, short sessions, you know, never more than an hour at a time on Teams sessions. And they have lunch bunch where they play games sometimes. And remote school's been good. In fact, actually, I think because of Julian's being habituated to using a computer, he's had an easier time adapting than some other kids who really struggle to put their attention onto a screen. So yeah, I mean, I think it's on the one hand really so eager to sort of see them back and able to interact, but also feeling like, well, we're doing what we can here, right? We're protecting our elders and all of the community, teachers and so forth. His teacher's pregnant, so it'll probably be a while, right? And we feel good about that. It helps, I think that Julian's really contextualized this and understands what it means to take care of your community in this way. So.
Does anyone else have anything to add? All right. Just another kind of, just check the little chat box. Another question, maybe this might one for Stephen and Susan, kind of how do you communicate, and obviously Catherine and Steve, please feel free to join in too. How is it communicating with your doctors about your child's needs and when they can't advocate for themselves or kind of say what's wrong or how they're feeling, I guess? Can you kind of talk a little bit more about that?
I can tell you that we tend to stick with doctors a very long time. They tend to get rid of us. Because once you've learned the kiddo, you hate to let go unless you absolutely have to. We've had a couple of the specialists move away. We've had one where he's outaged. So we only change when we're forced to change. So I can at least call and say, okay, I've got the Stephen. This is my scoop. And I'll share a little bit. We were in the hospital for 3 weeks in December due to a severe case of pancreatitis. So we got home and we started eating food, trying to increase his food through his G-tube. And he kept saying his stomach hurt and to stop the feeds. And we couldn't figure out if it hurt because of the pancreas got mad again, or if it's because he was truly full. So we stopped him. You know, we were listening to him. We stopped him. And finally, we did blood work this week and we got the lab results back and the pancreas is not mad. So that's confirming us that he truly is full. His stomach was hurt because we were overfilling it. It was from not having food for almost 3 weeks, not a lot of it, if at all, on some of those days. We were just trying to force in too much at one time, even though it was a slow feed. The stomach said, I'm full. So that was good to know that, because he didn't show the typical signs of pancreatitis. So he did not have any feeling between the autism high pain tolerance level that we have, and the Duchenne's neuropathy. We didn't have any of the normal pain. So when he started saying that his, whoops, excuse me, hey, stop. You gonna sneeze? Okay, he's okay. Excuse me. So when he started saying that his tummy hurt, we weren't quite sure what that meant. So this week we figured out that based on the blood numbers for the lab tests that we were getting, it's because he really was getting full, not because the pancreas was mad. We allow him to type for the doctors. We've always encouraged the doctors to talk to him, not to us. Don't talk over him, talk to him. This guy took medical terminology as an optional class because he wanted to know what his doctors were saying about him. That's pretty damn good, I thought. You know, so he's aware of what's going on. He may not be able to spell it out exactly, like my tummy hurts, where we knew that that could mean a couple of different things, but he's aware of what's going on. So it's like talk to him directly. And like, so we tend to stick to the doctors the long term. So they get to know the guy, you know, and go from there. He's like, this is Stephen we're talking about. So what are you going to do? What, you know, this is what he's saying based on his previous history. How are we going to go forward? And that's really, really where we go through with it.
That's great. Catherine or Stevie, you want to add anything there? All right.
I think Julian's at an age where.
I'm sorry, Daniel. Who is that to?
Just if you guys want to chime in there.
Okay. Yeah, I would just like to agree with Susan there and emphasize the a lot of people that you encounter, physicians, I mean, anybody in everyday life, have a tendency not to address your child directly and talk about them rather than to them. And that's something we also strongly discourage. And because especially if you're using any type of assisted or augmentative communication, it's imperative for them to be able to have the opportunity to speak for themselves. And, you know, for people to help people learn to be a little bit more patient, because it will take, you know, a little bit longer. Stephen's awful fast on that board, but it takes Megan a little bit of time sometimes to be able to express herself. But you know, eventually people get it, and they will become a little bit more patient and learn to speak to your child directly, and rather than expecting us to speak for her, because that's just it's just impolite. I mean, we wouldn't want anybody speaking for us. So and our children don't want that either. So especially once they're adults.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, that's a lesson that I've had to learn too. It's hard because you want your child to be able to express what they want to. And so I have found that I have to check myself from interpreting for Julian when he's trying to use his voice. And that's another reason sort of to lean on the assistive tech and say, you have an option, you can make yourself heard. But it is, I mean, for me, it's not necessarily the most instinctive thing to sort of check that rather than try to, you know, help him be understood by the world, right? It's kind of, you got to remember you're teaching a kid to fish, right? But I did want to also just make a comment that there are many wonderful people in the medical system, as there are in all walks of life, and the system is terrible. It's not supportive of families, especially of patients who have complicated, evolving conditions, durable medical equipment needs, etc. I think anybody who's on here because they have a connection to a person with Duchenne's or another muscular dystrophy knows this. And I think, you know, we have to keep trying to figure out how do we advocate as a group for improvements in this. Currently, we are trying to scrape together to pay a consultant to help us in replacing his power wheelchair, which is 5 years old, which he has clearly outgrown. Because when we wait on the elements of the system to help us do it, they have no idea what to recommend in terms of equipment that is a good fit together and for him, that will be durable, that will evolve with his needs, that are affordable and or can be approved by insurance. Insurance, its default is to say no. And we have had to go, when we got his first power chair, the one that he has now, we had to we got rejected twice, and I had to take it to the plan administrator because I work for I worked at that time for King County, the county we live in, and we were a self-insured organization. And so I had to literally get them to renegotiate the contract because it seemed so crazy that a kid who clearly needed a power wheelchair wasn't going to get one because, oh, he had a manual wheelchair, right? I mean, how is that developmentally appropriate? So these kinds of things, having our doctor, our primary care, the person who follows us in biochemical genetics tell us, yeah, we rely on you parents to tell us what the latest developments are in your child's disorder. I mean, it has to change. We have to find ways to say, you know, these patients are important, and it's not about just, you know, it's not retail, right? They don't go in and buy one thing and then you're done, right? We got to find ways to make these things fit together so that they have the dignity to be able to be out in the community, to be able to communicate, and to be able to figure out how they fit in and can incredibly valuably contribute. So that's my little soapbox for the moment.
I think we all can agree with Catherine on that one. And I'd love to chat a little bit more with you offline because I have some ideas and ways we can kind of work together there. I think I say all the time, you know, why develop or create something if people aren't going to have access to it? You know, why create these devices if it's just going to be held above people's heads at the end of the day too? And how valuable they are to the families and how much change that they really can bring. It's incredible to see, but I think, you know, we always are constantly fighting, but I think we'll get there one day, hopefully. But yeah, that was great. Thank you so much. We did have some questions as well that I think are really great. And let me just grab this. And obviously feel free to, if all of you guys want to answer, feel free. What would be the best way to approach communication if I'm unable to understand the first time?
Danielle, do you mean you as a recipient or somebody? Is this sort of advice that we would give to somebody who's attempting to engage with our child?
Yes, sorry, hold on. I didn't see the top. Oh, I have the whole thing now. Sorry, guys. Wanting to find the best way to approach communication, also wanting to avoid asking for clarity from a guardian or someone else near them. What would be the best way to approach communication if I'm unable to understand the first time? Is it frustrating or insensitive to ask an individual to use their device for clarity or to continue to repeat themselves? You want me to, that was long, I can repeat that too.
I can respond a little bit and say, I mean, it's situational, right? Just like any communication that we have. This is something that you might experience with an older parent, for example, who just doesn't seem to hear you anymore, right? Sometimes you just ask them to repeat themselves, and sometimes you work on doing it another way. Sometimes you do a little guessing. None of those things are inherently disrespectful, but it's about observing them. What is it that they're struggling with, or what is their temperament? If they're feeling really impatient, I mean, one way to say is, yeah, I'm not getting it. Can you help me with your device? Help them help you. It's own that it's you who doesn't understand. It's not them who's failing to communicate necessarily, right? It's a joint communication is a joint endeavor, and if you're not getting it, then you problem solve, right?
Yep. Yeah, I totally agree. And it's okay to ask. I mean, and to work through it and to figure it out. And the fact that you're concerned enough to want to understand, that is more powerful than anything else, because you're showing that you're concerned and you're engaged. And as long as you're making an effort, it's the people who just disregard and go on that's when it's hurtful. So
Even with Stephen, he can type out the answer and I'm like, that makes no sense to me. You're going to have to spell it out. You don't tell me a different way because I'm not understanding what you're saying.
Yeah.
Their brains think a little bit different than ours. Let's be for real.
Yeah, I love Catherine's point. Let them show you. I think that's just so true. I guess Catherine, you touched on this, and I'm sure again all of you guys, frustrations when you're not understanding, or you guys are failing to kind of communicate or see the same level. What are some ways that you as a parent kind of cope with that? Is it through meditation, kind of taking a 5-minute break outside, and how does your child handle frustration? If that question makes sense. But
You really want us to show all our dirty laundry here, huh? I mean, I'm sure many of you have encountered that thing where people say, oh, this only happens to people who can handle it, and you're such a hero and all those things. I'll tell you that right now, not a hero, can't handle it all the time, doing my best. Sometimes, yeah, I mean, I've tried a little meditation and yoga, and that's for me. That's finding ways to sort of be who I am and take care of me. But in the day-to-day, I mean, Julian's taught me a lot of patience, right? He's incredibly able to deal with just a huge range of things. And you know, we have this tradition where in the evenings when I'm putting him to bed, I'll ask him about his apple and his onion, the good thing of the day and the thing that was more challenging, maybe made you cry a little. And, you know, he tells me, oh, the whole day was my apple. I don't have an onion today. I'm like, really? Because I kind of remember we had a pain check-in and like, you like couldn't wait to get out of your chair. And, you know, you also, today was the day you had to go to infusion and you spent the whole day sitting in a hospital, right? And like, had all these computer problems or whatever. But for him, that's not what it is, right? If just as Steve was sort of saying, if you are getting to engage with people who seem interested, who seem to care, who want to have an exchange, I mean, it's great. Like he's a happy kid. So I'm really lucky in that way.
I'll say our situation is slightly different, or at least our daughter's reaction is a little different. Being almost a 40-year-old adult, she's got a small level of tolerance for her parents, who are her primary caregivers, to if we don't get it, if we don't understand. It's kind of like, and she will just give up on us every now and then. It's kind of like, okay, after 40 years, if you don't get it, then I quit. So which is probably to be expected, right? But we don't run into that very often because we have a lot of experience together and we've gone through a lot of stuff together. And but it's you know, you just have to learn to be forgiving. So.
And here you just do what you got to do. That's what it comes down to it. And Catherine, that's kind of what you were saying. We're not a saint. We're not an angel. We just do what we got to do. And we just keep plugging along for the sake of our kids. I mean, it is what it is.
Absolutely. What are some of the biggest, you know, highlights and challenges you guys face as parents?
Okay, as we were talking about a minute ago, and older people with hearing impairments, could you repeat that, please?
All right, well, I can change it for, let's talk then about some of the highlights of the equipment and devices that you guys use and some of the challenges then. We'll switch that.
Oh, okay.
We tried to do some of the electronic equipment. We started out with PECs, and that's probably what you were referring to, Catherine, with the picture exchange again. By middle of grade school, he was like, nope. So they would have them pick choices. They would finger choice. And then when we got this typing program, or when we started typing on the paper that we type, we did find a program out there for, I know it's on iPads. I would think it's on non-iPads too. It's called Assistive Express. It's like $20. And it will let you type your words. It will let you pre-program your words. It will let you prompt your words, like preemptive typing, and it will say the letter by letter or the word by word or all the sentence when you push enter. And that worked great for a while. The problem is the buttons on the program are like this tiny, and his little hands, even though he's got small hands, we lost some of that fine motor piece. And so we no longer, I mean, we use it, like when we go out and do fill the boot at the grocery stores pre-COVID, we programmed it and we said, thank you for donating to XYZ. And you would just push the button when people put money in. And that way he acknowledged them. He said, thank you. And people turned around and went, wow, you know? But so it has its good points, don't get me wrong, it has its good points, but the buttons are very tiny. So now when we do the board at home with all of our paper boards, the squares are 1 inch by 1 inch. It is much easier to hit, per se, if you want to call it that. And even then, he's getting kind of lazy nowadays. Instead of using a finger, he uses his hands, so you have to guess what word he's typing and then fill in the blanks. So it's like Scrabble overload here sometimes. But we know that with the progression of the disease, we're going to be losing some of that even more of that fine motor. So we are working with our local children's hospital and their speech department. We've been practicing with the eye gaze machine, and we've had some pretty good luck. We're not finished with the test program yet of which app's going to be which computer, which app, all that fun stuff. We're still working on that, but hoping to finish that up hopefully by summertime, and then to see what we can get and how to afford to get one of those. Because what's sad is our kiddos need them. A lot of people need those types of machines, even not kiddos. They don't make it cheap. They really try to gouge you with our disabilities in order to have a free and equal life. So it'll be interesting to see what happens from there. But that's where our difficulties are coming in. Like I said, we had a great program. It worked great until the fine motor left. We're using this now, but we know that we're going to lose more fine motor, and then we're going to get to the more expensive stuff, and that's going to be the challenge of how to pay for that one, because that's not a cheap program.
Yeah, having used computerized devices now for, I don't know, 30 years, you're right. It is, the technology is very expensive. And just like Catherine was saying about DME in general, it's getting it approved for funding is extremely difficult. Yeah, but there's a lot of alternative sources out there. When we lived in Texas, we found out that the communications, there was a communications agency in Texas that would provide certain TTY devices, for example, for hearing impaired individuals, but they also would fund augmentative communication devices. And so we got one of Megan's devices paid for by them. She got a iPad with the ProLoQ software on it, and it from a nonprofit organization that we had actually very loose connections to. So, I mean, there are sources out there. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort. I will give my wife just extreme kudos for being patient enough to work that network and to find those people and to advocate for our daughter. And then you've got the whole medical side of it as well. And this is where having especially a family practice doctor that you can go to who understands your child's needs, that you can go to and just say, this is what we need. They know you well enough, they trust you, that, okay, yeah, I get it. So I will write the script that you need, and then you typically have to have a letter from a professional, a therapist or somebody, to justify the need. And in a lot of cases, we simply offer to write the letter ourselves and give it to them, and they will print it out on their letterhead. So, they don't take offense to that, because it's hard for them to figure out exactly how to word it that's specific to your child. And if you offer in just a sincere way to help, a lot of people will take you up on that. And so that's kind of our standard operating procedure now.
Yeah, I totally agree of what a concern it is, Steve. And it seems so crazy to have to it's always a one-off, right? You have to sort of figure out what the technology is yourself a lot of the times, and then get it funded. So I would say, just, for us, of course, we've been in school. That's been sort of the primary way that we've gotten introduced to assistive technology and stuff, and we're really lucky in the school district. Seattle has a lot of challenges. We're now under federal oversight for failing to deliver special ed services during pandemic. But I think in some ways the pandemic has sort of pointed out these things are possible, right? They suddenly had to come up with a lot of computers and a lot of ways to improve access for kids. And if they can do that, then they can certainly figure out how to make sure that the kids who need assistive communication devices have them in their school setting. So I would just encourage parents, you know, learn as much as you can about IDEA and the other guarantees that the federal government gives us in terms of what school districts have to provide, and be relentless, sort of ask for those things, find your allies in the school system. You know, if you find somebody in the communications department or, you know, wherever, technology department who seems to know what they're doing, you know, support them, make friends with them, ask them how you can advocate for them to get budget released. We've found sometimes that like a thing will be approved, but then the budget won't be released for it. So it's like, okay, well, I guess we're just waiting, right? No, we're calling the school board. So
be vocal, be politely vocal.
Yeah. And then I would say the other big thing, just in response to your question, Danielle, about challenges is how do you integrate all these different things, right? How do you figure out how to I mean, Julian doesn't have the dexterity to write math problems out, right? So you got to have a device that helps that at the same time as you have a device that's doing the speaking, right? And then he wears hearing aids, and so he's plugged into a remote mic that the teacher has to learn to use to, you know, be able to speak more directly to him. And all of these things together and wearing them and making sure they always have batteries, like, and they're not creating feedback with each other. It's a challenge, right? You're sort of always trying to balance those things. Uh-oh, we lost Steve.
I'm here. I'm just plugging in computer.
Awesome, guys. Thank you guys for answering that. That's really helpful. And I think at the end of the day, you know, that's something we kind of always say at Jeff Foundation too. It's you do have to be your own best advocate, not only for your family, but also for your child, and to really push your child as well to advocate for their needs at the same time. I guess we'll leave off on a positive note. I just would love to hear a little bit more about some of, you know, activities or opportunities and programs that you guys utilize for your children. Not to toot our own horn, but I'd love to hear about Camp Promise experiences, like things like that your child connects to and gets to participate in.
I've got a fussy guy here, so I'll go real quick and I may have to go push him out real quick. I can tell you that we use the Assistive Express on the iPad. He's got a couple of buddies here that are all in the same boat with the communication, just with different reasons. And there for a while, pre-COVID, we were getting together like once a month, and they're all guys. So they were trying to get together and figure out how they're going to go out. They decided they were all going to go to Hooters. And so we told them that they had to be able to communicate with their dads, because most of them don't enjoy communicating with their fathers. They use their moms. That the moms were not going to go, and they were going to have to figure out how to communicate with dads, and then they could go. And then COVID hit. In the meantime, they said that they were going to write a book about communication and how their communication different from other people. And they were supposed to each do a chapter, and I don't think it's gotten very far. They did try to do some Zoom meetings, but we've got high school through college, and to get to Zoom meetings on the weekends with the guys, they were on Zoom overload, and they said no. So hopefully come the summertime, we'll be able to go at least outside to a park and spread about and be able to communicate that way and have a social life that way. And the one app that we have found that Stephen enjoys, and he can call it, we can text grandma and say, hey, can you hop on? There's an app called House Party. It's free, but it plays some games and allows some, I mean, it's almost like a FaceTime, but not FaceTime. But it allows you to talk and see somebody at the same time. It's a free app. And we play Uno with grandma when we get bored. And you can have a couple of others. I think you can go up to 4 or 6 people. So you have all your friends sign into this program at such and such a time, and you all play Uno together. So it's been kind of fun that way. And those tend to be our fun go-tos, other than his normal YouTube or cartoons, Nickelodeon, while his food is going or something like that. I know you're ready for a rest. So that's what we've been using. And then we utilize the technology then for school, because it's all based on videos and A, B, C, D, answers. So that's kind of different, but it works.
Susan, go ahead. I'll let you guys go. Thanks, Stephen, for joining us as well today. It was great seeing you. We'll see you guys sometime soon, though. Thanks again for joining us.
He says, thank you for having me. I'll be right back.
All right. Stephen, Catherine, if you guys want to take over.
Will you re-guide me towards the question, Danielle?
Yeah.
It's about positive social experiences or positive experiences with communication, or what are we?
If you want to kind of take a jab at both of those, but kind of just, sorry to put it on you guys. But yeah, just kind of some of those positive experiences that you have seen or been able to participate in with your child, whether it be through communication or through a type of program, like Camp Promise or something like that.
Yeah. Well, Camp Promise was absolutely phenomenal for Julian and frankly for his parents. To have somebody else kind of be the one and figuring out a little bit about how to let go of like what's going to happen. And you know, he's really excited. There he goes.
Hey, Julia.
He's going to say hello. I think not quite on camera yet. The other way. Lex, a little bit more that way. Or no, sorry. Yeah, there, it's backwards. There we go. Hey, Julia.
Hey, buddy, how are you?
That's his lift and his caregiver, Lex. Yeah, so, I mean, Camp Promise was huge. He loved being there. He wanted me to tell you guys today that he loved the archery and he can't wait to get back to that. And he loves boating. And next time, can he be out on the boat a little bit longer? Because the last time it was too short.
I'll pull up some strings and make that happen for him.
Oh yeah. So that's been wonderful. And you know, I think I really hope that as Julian gets older, we can sort of evolve towards more of those experiences where he, you know, is a self-advocate in them and kind of gets more and more independent. Those are some of our goals, right? For him to figure out ways to be more independent, and communication, of course, is such a huge part of that, because none of us are really independent, right? We're all relying on the fabric of society, kind of holding together. We all need help, but to be able to ask for it, be clear about what you need, and be able to direct people on how to get it for you. Those are important things. So. Yeah, Camp Promise has been great. I would say, you know, let your child drive, but one thing that's been incredibly great for us has been music. He's been in, there's a curriculum called Music Together that is offered, I know, all around the country and the world, where kids from a very young age kind of get together initially with their parents, and then they kind of are in the classes just together, where they're singing and doing sort of musical activities, not necessarily playing music, it's sort of, or playing instruments, it's sort of pre that. And it only goes up through age 7, but it was part of how he made friends, how he learned to love his own voice, right? Even if it wasn't necessarily understandable to others, to be able to develop tone and musicality, and to relate to other children through music. He auditioned for Seattle Children's Chorus and has been successful in that after some effort. It took them a little bit of figuring out how they were going to make it work, but I mean, he learns different parts of the music and he sings them, and they've been doing it virtually, which I don't envy that, but that's been a great thing for him. So I would just say, you know, don't assume that things aren't accessible to you. We had to look to find a chorus that literally practiced in a place that wheelchairs could get into. And then we the first time we auditioned, they were like, not sure he's ready, but we kind of went at it again, and I think that's been a really good experience. I'm gonna have to jump off myself because unfortunately I have another meeting.
No, go ahead. Appreciate it. You're fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yeah, really great. Thanks for having me. Nice to meet you.
Yes, finally. I will follow up with you as well. Thanks, Catherine. All right, and Steve.
Megan is a very, very social person, and the last year has been, pardon me, extremely difficult for her. And she loves being around people. I didn't mention this earlier, but in lieu of using her communication device, and what she does normally at home is sign, because she's completely nonverbal. And so we understand her signs and we communicate just fine without the device. But and so as a result, we switched devices a few years ago, and she hasn't become really proficient on her new device. And this last year has been a huge setback on that. And the fact that we don't use it that much at home has not helped either. But you know, anytime she loves being with people, she loves being out, and you know, the communication is key to any of that, whether it's, you know, being at camp, or we found through our local parks and rec, they have specialized recreation, being involved in that, or Special Olympics, or when we were in Texas, we found a theater group that kind of opened up a program for people with special needs, and Megan was part of that. Absolutely loved it. Learned to do her lines using her device in plays that she did, and just had a great time. Loved being on stage. But you know, it's just getting out there and being with people, and obviously that's been a real challenge. She goes to a day program 3 days a week normally, but that hasn't happened since last March. But fortunately, they've done some Zoom stuff, but that's only, you know, 1 hour a couple of times a week. So, you know, and to find these things a lot of times is can be a challenge. I mean, we've talked a lot about the challenges, and it just means it's a lot of work on us as parents or caregivers, is to get out there and find these things that are opportunities to try and match up activities that meet with our child's interests and abilities somewhat. Less emphasis on that, because a lot of times the things that we aren't sure if they're going to be able to do. I mean, I couldn't have imagined Megan actually being in a play and speaking lines until we kind of got into it and started working it and figuring out how to make it work. And she ended up doing a fantastic job. So you got to work at it and find those opportunities.
Find
So.
the way. God, oh, that's so nice. I love that. Thanks so much for sharing that, Steve. If there's anything else you guys want to add, or a piece of advice that you'd like to give to some of the folks in the community, feel free. No? All right, then.
The one
so
thing I'll just add something real quick is specifically in the electronic augmentative communication, the device industry. Fortunately, there's a lot more options out there than there used to be. The trick is, and I think Susan touched on this as well, and that is finding out what fits best with your child. Now, finding someone who can help you with that is remarkably challenging still in this day and age. I can't believe that this area of augmentative communication has not advanced more in the last 30 years that we've been involved with it. And finding people, speech pathologists who really understand augmentative communication and who can help your child become proficient in it is still a remarkable challenge. Finding consultants or, you know, private agencies who are able to do this, it's just hard. and we become dependent upon the vendors themselves, which is a two-edged sword. And you know, unfortunately, my experience has been, I come from a technology background. I spent 40 years working in technology, so I have a leg up there. But so I'm lucky in that I have that background, but it's hard, and I won't try to mince words on that and put a pretty bow on it. It's hard. It takes work. It takes effort. It takes time to find people who can really assist your child. And you can't always believe that one solution is going to always work right. But thank goodness there's a lot more solutions out there than there used to be. There's at least, I looked up earlier, there's at least 4 or 5 really good augmentative communication apps that you can download for an iPad. Then you can run into issues. Our daughter has to have a key guard because otherwise she hits incorrect responses all the time, the wrong letter, the wrong icon, whatever it might be. And sometimes that's hard to find for an iPad, but there are companies that are starting to make them now. So it's you still got to kind of put it together. And so try to find a consultant in your area. If this is something that you're trying to do, try to find an organization that specializes in augmentative communication. There's a few out there. The one that we had in our area, we live in Tacoma, Washington. The one we had in our area didn't make it through the last year, and they shut down, unfortunately. And I will put myself out there and say, if we can help, we've had 30 years experience. We're certainly willing to provide a little bit of help if we can. We're happy to share what we've learned. So I'll just put that out there.
Same here. We're willing to help out too. It's a lot of trial and error. It's a lot of plugging into special needs, whether it be for us, we're dual diagnosed, so we have the autism side that we plug into as well. Then you get the physical side. I was on a Zoom last night of camps for kiddos. Some go up to age 18, some don't age out, and some can handle the medical the complications that we have with Stephen, because we're like a mini hospital room in him. And I reached out to side chat and I'm like, can you handle this? This is something different. And she's like, not a problem. I'm like, wow, be checking in with you soon, you know. And she was only 2 hours away, which is good. Where unfortunately Camp Promise is a little bit further each direction. But it was something to check into. It was for 4 nights. And Stephen's like, because I had him sit on the call. I'm like, he goes, that sounds fun. And I'm like, well, we'll check into it. I didn't tell him there was a Harry Potter week though. So, yeah, I thought that was a good theme. But you know, you sit in and listen to a lot of the disability boards, whether it be for your county or your state or the school district. When you end up making your own support system anyway with all of the special needs parents that you meet in your area, and you just network from there, and they're like, hey, have you heard this? Hey, have you heard that? And that's really how we get a lot of our fingers, you know, our fingers out in the different bowls.
Yeah, and I think that's why we're kind of, you know, trying to have these webinars. Exactly, you know, parents learn from parents. Like, we're learning from each other as we go, what's working, what's not going, how we can fight a little bit harder, what words we can say to kind of work out in our favor, you know, just those things. And I think all the points you guys touched on today were fantastic, and I can't thank you enough. I do real quick, I know we're a little bit out of time. Just want to say we got some awesome feedback from the community. People are saying you guys are awesome, and thank you so much for sharing all that. Yes, so person asking, yes, it will be recorded. We will share this as well. Feel free to share with others you may know that might benefit from the community watching this video. But then also, Steve, someone asked if you could share the list of those 5 apps that you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Do you by you just name them at the top of your head, or if you could follow up with me in an email and I can send it out to the attendees.
Sure, happy to do that. I'll also include my contact information.
Okay, fantastic. So I will share an email out to everyone attending and with all those resources that Susan, Steve, and Catherine all talked about. I think that would be really helpful for everyone. So if there's any other questions, please let me know. But thank you all so much for coming out today. Thank you guys so much for sharing your personal experiences. I think everyone who attended today is going to walk away knowing something and have benefited from this presentation. So again, big claps to you guys. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for all that you do for the community. I'll let everyone go though. Have a wonderful Friday and a great weekend, and join us again on another webinar in the next few weeks. So
Sounds good. Thank you.
thanks, guys.